people are checking out through a portal. They need to go there. So you've got to make it easy. You've got to be able to spin that up very quickly, going to make it really easy to manage with a small team that maybe aren't necessarily digitally mature.
Welcome to another episode of the Ecommerce Toolbox, Experts Perspective. Joining us today, we have a very special guest, Travis Hess, who's the CEO of BigCommerce. Travis and I first met when he had joined as the president. Obviously, we know there's been a lot going on over at BigCom. So really excited to have you on the show today. Welcome, Travis.
Thanks, Kalen. Thanks for having me. Really appreciate it.
So, you have a very well-decorated background over 2 decades. You've been on the agency side in leadership. You've done consulting for brands like Accenture, LiveArea. You have a lot of perspective that you brought into BigCommerce. I always like to learn a bit more about the guests. So maybe walk us through your career journey from a high level and how you ended up now being on the platform side in SaaS.
Yeah, I would describe it as somewhat unorthodox in the sense as to your point earlier. I've been a lifelong services guy, so I grew up on the agency and the consulting, the services side of the business. I've been in e-com for the better part of almost 20 years, and that has almost been exclusively on the services side. Although back in the day, I would argue with a lot of the on-prem custom platforms, the big guys, the ATGs and the IBMs and the Hybrises back in the day, there was enough co-selling and custom complicated things we were doing together. I often felt like I was on the software side, or at least keeping the software side a bit more honest on what it would take to actually achieve features and functions and make them digestible for clients. But also having come out of services, very business outcome oriented as opposed to being focused on features and functions. So when the opportunity came and arose, I'd sold with several other partners our last agency to Accenture, and had spent maybe 5 or so years in the Shopify ecosystem running the largest Shopify agency. The opportunity to come to BigCommerce was really exciting for obvious reasons, and maybe some less obvious reasons. The obvious reasons being a great substantial business, one that I respected in the space and I had competed against from time to time, one that I had a previous partnership experience with when I was running LiveArea. We had just developed that partnership towards the tail end of my tenure there, but was left very impressed. And then honestly, just getting into the interviewing process and getting to know my predecessor, Brent, and his vision for where the company was and where he brought it to and where he wanted to take it, where I thought it could be taken. Just a lot of really interesting opportunities to leave your fingerprints on something and take advantage of a fantastic foundational business that was publicly traded, $350 million in revenue, and larger, and I've said this publicly many times, but larger than ATG was when they sold to Oracle, larger than Hybris was when they sold to SAP, larger when Magento was, both times they sold, once to private equity and then the second time to Adobe, and larger than Demandware was when they sold to Salesforce. So it's not a small business. And, just given where I've spent my time over the years, I felt like BigCommerce had the best opportunity with the collection of assets that it had to disrupt the industry in areas that I felt was most interesting to me personally. And that was a pretty easy decision for me to come in.
Very cool. And I think things changed pretty quickly. You joined as president, transitioned to CEO just a few months later. What were some of your main focuses during that transition? Obviously, that was a big change for the org. A lot of the executive team had been there for a better part of a decade. So yeah, maybe talk to us a bit about what was top of mind for you during that transition.
Yeah, I knew taking the job, I knew there was going to be a pretty large transformation effort. That was well sort of presumed when I was being vetted. And I think, particularly on the go-to-market side, I think where the product suite was and where we wanted to take it wasn't necessarily optimized or aligned with what we had been putting out in market. And so I felt like there was a great collection of ingredients and assets that hadn't been properly represented. Again, kind of coming out of the SMB space, I think a lot of folks fall victim to that. It's like you're trying to be everything to everyone. You've got a lot of cohorts you're trying to support. And I've kind of realized this very quickly early on, right? Maybe on earnings, comment along the lines of, well, we're not trying to be Shopify, or our ICP isn't necessarily the same ICP as Shopify. And people start screaming from the rafters like, oh, I knew they weren't going to do this anymore. So I understand the temptation to try to be everything to everyone and not alienate anyone. I think if you looked at the install base and if you talk to our customers and our partners of why people buy BigCommerce and why they work with Feedonomics and MakeSwift, I think you learn pretty quickly that there are unique things about the suite, and it just, a lot of the transformation really had to do about bringing that a bit more forward. And by bringing that forward, it was going to force a focused effort where we're going to maybe narrow our focus on everything, but go deeper within that focused area. And so a lot of the spirit of the change and the transformation, and we've been digesting and metabolizing a lot of change. It's all been in the spirit to make us better and make us more focused and kind of over communicating and leaning in internally and externally as to why we're doing it. Unfortunately, most folks don't like change, and it makes a lot of people feel uncomfortable at times. And I think I've been through this several times before on the services side. So I'm used to, engaging with clients and facilitating transformation and change. And I've also gone through a couple of reboots and restructures, having run different companies and metabolizing acquisitions and things like that. So I've done this before, and what I've learned is just over communicating where it is you're going and why, and just keep reverberating that over and over and over again. And so long story short, the subset of really brilliant, talented leaders that got us to the 350 million in revenue in the business and what it was, over the last, 6 to 12 months, isn't necessarily the right mix that we're kind of leveraging going forward. It doesn't make them not fantastically talented or appreciated. It just means that the business is going through a different transformation, and oftentimes that requires, different skill sets and different dispositions and things like that. And so a lot of the change has been bringing in top SaaS leaders, top commerce leaders, folks, many of which I've known and worked with and respected in the ecosystem. And that just accelerates the transformation, and bringing in folks that have done this before, that are all kind of aligned on the vision. And it just, especially in a public market, it's a very difficult thing to transform when you're publicly traded at the size of business that we are. And most people don't do it because it's challenging. I think we've done a pretty good job despite some of the macro volatility as of late. I'm really pleased with where we are and where we're going, but it's, I'd be the first one to admit it's been a lot.
Yeah, no, super great insight. And I heard you speak, I think it was last year at the big summit, around earning the right to win in certain ICPs and certain segments. So maybe talk to us a bit about where you think BigCommerce has the right to win. Like you mentioned, not everywhere for everybody, and being super upfront about that helped, in my experience, with product development and organizing go-to-market from sales to onboarding to CS, and really building that kind of flywheel that SaaS is supposed to be. So yeah, maybe talk us through a bit about where the right to win is in your opinion, and some of the reasons why you think that BigCom should be leaning in there.
Yeah, I think, generally speaking, one of the things, I've talked about this publicly, one of the first things I did was build an offerings group here. It's something I borrowed or stole, whatever vernacular you want to use, from Accenture. But they have this concept there around offerings, which, again, given the complexity and the matrix nature of that business, you quickly learn, living there, why having an offerings group is so particularly useful. It basically forces you to productize what it is that you're offering as it relates to a value proposition in very succinct terms, oriented to very succinct markets. And so I felt like one of the first things I wanted to do was integrate both MakeSwift and Feedonomics. Those businesses had not been fully integrated. We had acquired both. Feedonomics almost 3 years ago, MakeSwift maybe now a year and a half ago, give or take. And so I needed to do that. And back to the point I made a few minutes ago, this sort of concept of being everything to everyone. There was a lot of confusion as to who BigCommerce was for. And if you look at the cohorts of the types of clients, even between Feedonomics and BigCommerce, they don't necessarily align as far as size and complexity and perception and things like that. And so given we were going through the integration aspect of bringing those products in-house and integrating them, coupled with the fact we're trying to refine who it is we're for, the offerings group was able to kind of create this horizontal, holistic look across all three products and across three core offerings, which they're deliberately broad: B2B, B2C, and small business. if you look at our business and the split, although we don't guide to this, roughly speaking, they represent about a third a piece of the business. We've seen more, net new bookings around B2B and things like that I've been public about. But generally speaking, you don't want to alienate any one of those. And so as you look into all three, let's just start on the B2C side. For us, obviously, we've been bringing the product suite up market for quite some time now. We're going to continue to do that. But who typically consumes us are those that are not, either that live in industries that are innately complicated or have complex requirements associated with who it is that they are, looking to differentiate more than the average bear, or they operate in markets that are wildly complicated or nuanced, whether those are regulated industries or there's other nuances to it, or those that appreciate the concept around composability. They want optionality, they want flexibility, they want openness. Those tend to land in our ICPs within B2C, right? If you're just a normal digitally native brand or a simple branded manufacturer with normalized requirements, chances are, I'm not saying we don't have any of those, have never won any of those in the past, that just generally speaking, that does not tend to fit inside our ICP. That tends to fit in one of our largest competitors' ICP. So great, let them have that. On the B2B side, it's a little bit of a different story. I think we're well respected, particularly mid-market and creeping up around B2B. And when I say B2B, certainly, wholesale is part of that. We've got a bunch of hybrid customers that sell direct to consumer through third parties or wholesale through third parties. I'm talking about, traditional manufacturers and distributors that come with the complexity typically associated with those sorts of use cases, big complicated catalogs, complicated bespoke price lists. Oftentimes it's a cost savings thesis where you're trying to drive automation and digitalization. Depending on where you are in your maturity curve, you might be greenfield, trying to digitize for the first time. You've got a small budget and a small head count. You need to do that quickly. We feel like we've got great, product market fits for that. Or you're someone maybe a bit more complicated and a bit more mature, where again, taking advantage of our capabilities out of the box and through composability, being able to appease more complicated use cases. We feel like we play in that market really well. And then on top of it, we've got a tremendous amount of optionality around payment, right? We don't commercialize our business by, operating like a bank. Although that may work at times in B2C, it definitely doesn't work in B2B. And then on the back end, typically with large manufacturers and distributors, you've got multiple sources of truth, multiple ERPs, things like that. We feel like it also plays really well in that market. And then lastly, in small business, again, I think the simple stuff we will reserve for our top competitors. In small business, again, organizations that live in complicated markets, regulated industries, businesses that are innately complex, whether that's multi-level marketing or direct selling or travel or things like that, or have a need for differentiation or customization or complexity, just lend itself to what it is we do best. And that's where we've really deliberately started leaning in more and more and more. It always existed. We just didn't articulate it as crisply as I think we probably could have, and just realizing that, we're not going to be for 80% of the market, and that's okay.
Yeah, it's funny you say that. Even as one of, obviously we're very well partnered together between our organizations, and even myself last year, I was curious with the questions that I just asked you around, what is your, in which scenario, if we have a client that's on a legacy platform and they're like, where do I go? In which case is BigCom clearly the best solution? So I think you've articulated it really, really well. So kudos to you and the team for clarifying it, because to your point, you can't be everything to everybody, and you need to have that kind of that right to win. So that's really, really, really cool to hear. I'm sure you've hired a lot of D-levels and VPs. You've seen it. And I learned this early in my career, and I haven't been around nearly as long as you, but I learned that there's some people that come in and they want to change everything because they want to put their hands on everything. And that's not necessarily a feature. It might be a bug, right? Also coming in, doing nothing. That's probably not why you're hired. Maybe talk to us through how you kind of balanced changing everything and what you felt like didn't need to be changed.
Oh gosh, we could spend a couple hours talking about that. Over drinks would probably be easiest. There's an art and a science to this, certainly. I think the beauty and the downside of being publicly traded is obviously it's heavily regulated, and listen, we have a fantastic team of FP&A and finance here. And I tell Daniel Lentz all the time that he makes me feel safe. He is a brilliant talent. And I think this isn't done in a vacuum. This is done cross-functionally within leadership. And I think to your point, it's getting everybody on the same page. I mean, we'd all love to do everything in a given time period or a given year. It's just not digestible fiscally or organizationally. And so part of the offerings group thesis isn't just to accelerate the integration and the go-to-market of the three products and sort of the ICPs. It's also really a synthesis of a prioritization framework internally to, again, get everybody collectively on the same page as to where it is we're placing our bets for the given year or the roadmaps across all three products. So that's actually served as kind of a centralized layer to kind of bring in all of those inputs from our install base, inputs from field marketing and sales and revenue, certainly inputs from product and engineering, and really synthesizing and boiling this down as to where would we list our top priorities and strategies that are going to increase client wallet share, increase ARPA, increase conversion rates, decrease churn, like all of those things, and then objectively place our bets as to what we're going to do and why, and then manage against that. So, I think, anytime there's new leadership, you at any place, I think you naturally see, just like a football team, a new head coach comes in and all of a sudden, maybe there's a new offensive coordinator, defensive coordinator, maybe they're keeping some of those folks, maybe they're not. But generally speaking, you're going to change guards, bring in folks that have done this with you before. There's a comfort level and a trust, and it's really about acceleration. You don't have a lot of time to do this in a public market. So that's the downside, but it's also the good side. It forces you to be incredibly crisp and focused in execution, because you just don't have an endless runway and there's not a tree in the backyard we can go pick money off of. It all needs to be funded and justified, and there's puts and takes, and it's hard. Like it is not for everyone, and for whatever reason, probably a separate episode where you can psychologically unpack that, why I'm attracted to these sorts of scenarios. I find myself in them, and I find myself energized by them. Not that I love change, but I love change when it's transforming something into something more efficient or better. And I think that journey, as you look back, I've learned more from transformations than I have in anything else. And I think you go into it with the right mindset. I think it's incredibly beneficial cross-functionally for people's careers. And like anything else, I'm not a Mensa candidate. You just do it enough, you get used to it. I don't have all of the answers, but you learn what not to do through skinning your knees along the way. And I think applying that in practice is it's fulfilling, but it's also rewarding in many regards too.
Yeah, no, it's great answer. I'd love to dive in. Sounds like you like a challenge. But maybe talk to us a bit about, you mentioned earlier in the positioning, kind of open SaaS, composable ecosystem, but also driving simplicity. You talked about, okay, well, you want flexibility, you want to drive best of breed, maybe you have some complex use cases. On the other side, complex use cases potentially comes with complex overhead, multiple vendor management, just straight up complexity in your stack, managing different integrations. How have you thought about it at the exec level of like balancing flexibility with making sure that you don't need a PhD to kind of operate the system?
Yeah, it's interesting. Like I always talk about this in terms of it being a spectrum in the space, right? And again, not to draw any political parallels, but if you think of the right side of that spectrum, and let's just use real players in the space, just because it's easier. If you think of composability and the purest form of it on the right side of that spectrum, and think of commerce tools, right, and composing things from scratch, I understand the benefit of that. I think they've done, arguably an amazing job from a marketing perspective over the years in articulating a vision. Now, they get dogged on a lot because they've had some attrition and some rumblings in market, certainly, and some criticism. But to their defense, not that I have any vested interest in Commerce Tool, just being honest, they also attacked probably the most complex TAM out there. And I don't care what platform or solution you threw at that TAM, it was going to be squeaky and rough and challenging and things like that. But again, that TAM is very, very narrow. It's big, but it's narrow. And if you look at the other side of that spectrum, as it relates to composability, I would say you've got your legacy monolith or your simplistic monolith. Go ahead and throw Shopify in that. I don't mean it disrespectfully. They are very much a monolith. And so Salesforce and SAP and everybody else. There are benefits to that, certainly. I would say on that spectrum, we're right of center. We're more towards the Commerce Tools model versus the monolith. I don't think we want to be a monolith. We also don't have the R&D and the capital to compete against a Shopify who's throwing off, however many billions a year in R&D. I'm surrendering the fact that I don't think this is a feature and function arms race that anyone's going to win. I don't think the market wants features and functions. If they did, they would still buy legacy because it's far more feature rich than anything new today. I think what they want is business outcome and they want agility. They want organizational agility. And so for us, what I'm trying to do is bring the benefits of composability, which we've done for a long time in the space, albeit more down market and mid market. And I'm trying to make it more digestible up market to meet a bigger TAM. And the way to do that is not only own the distribution in many regards, as you've alluded to earlier, by pre-bundling or pre-curating these capabilities, but I want to bring the benefits of composability without the heartburn and the headaches that typically come along with it. To your point, you need a PhD to stitch it all together. More importantly, you need money and time because that stuff takes a long time to materialize. And a lot of brand manufacturers, retailers, traditional manufacturers and distributors don't have time. Everything is fast. Speed trumps everything. And so we're trying to make this more digestible operationally, technically, commercially, and being really deliberate about it, but also not having a walled garden approach of you've got to do it by our terms and our way. We're really trying to be quite pure and objective in the way that we're driving this by way of API. And so we're going to start orienting this towards specific markets, specific industries, accelerated reference architectures, and things like that, because I believe most clients want optionality, and we've got to make that optionality consumable. If it's too expensive, it takes too long, you're going to limit your TAM. And at the same time, I think the monolith fits the right cohorts that choose monolith. I think I'm not saying it's a bad model. I think it works for a lot of people. It's not what we do. It's not what we're interested in, and I don't think we're going to compete there very well. So we're trying to be true to ourselves, do what it is that we've done for a while, that we fully believe in philosophically. I've said this openly too. This is not a new denomination of Christianity. This is a different religion. Like, we are approaching this very differently. And again, I don't think it's for 80% of the market, but I believe more disruption and innovation will come by way of third-party ISVs versus anything we could practically do ourselves. I'm just trying to make the ingestion of that disruption and that innovation by ISVs commercially, operationally, and technically viable. That's what we're orienting to. That's where we're taking this, if that's helpful.
Very, very helpful. You've mentioned many times B2B is heating up. You guys come up a lot as a serious contender in B2B, a lot of functionality. You guys have obviously made acquisitions. Why do you think the space is heating up now? Like, why now?
Well, I mean, this is conjecture. It's just my opinion. Well, first of all, they tend to be laggards, just generally speaking, behind B2C. B2C is just typically simpler use cases and stuff that's been around for a long time. I mean, I'm not trying to dunk on all of us in the space in B2C, but I think most of the use cases and requirements are well documented. You've certainly got industries and sub-industries looking to digitally transform that are behind others that maybe because of regulations or other innate complexities were maybe late to the game. But on the B2B side, I think you've got a myriad of examples, certainly, down market, folks that need to digitize and need to digitally transform really quickly because they just can't afford to continue to run the same manual processes that they're running today. I mean, B2B, as you know, traditionally, it's not about conversion. It's not about experience, although it is to a certain extent where people need to find stuff. But most of the time, people are checking out through a portal. They need to go there. So you've got to make it easy, and you've got to be able to spin that up very quickly. Got to make it really easy to manage with a small team that maybe aren't necessarily digitally mature. And then as you go up market and up in maturity, similar needs, maybe bigger teams, more complex back ends. They also want a standardized framework by which to inorganically grow as well. A lot of these guys tend to acquire their way into growth in other markets. And so part of what we're trying to do is allow that digital transformation to happen very quickly, while also providing a standardized framework by which new assets can be ingested into as they inorganically grow and acquire things. So two different spectrums of digital transformation. I feel like B2B has always been a bit farther behind than B2C. They don't tend to drink from the same watering holes. They don't tend to be as obvious. They tend to live in these unique industries within themselves that not everyone necessarily understands. And I think they respond to different sort of stimuli and solutions. It's just something that lends itself to the openness, flexibility, and the customization that's properly allowed within our platform. And so it naturally and organically maps really well to the space. So that combination of all those things at once is really leading to a lot of momentum. But we've never, to be honest, we just bifurcated the sales and go-to-market teams for B2B. We never had a separate B2B team. We treated B2B almost like additional features and functions. If I was to be critical in the old way of doing things, we've really leaned in. We've bifurcated that entire go-to-market team. We're leaning in now. Most of the stuff will be out in market sooner rather than later on that bifurcation in the marketing efforts and things like that. So we really have been doubling down there in that motion alone. Not to say that we like it better than our other child or children, just saying that we've not done ourselves any favors by kind of treating it like just some additional features and functions. It's a real bifurcated business that requires the bifurcation to really treat it as immersively as we feel it deserves.
Very interesting. And let's pivot, talk a couple of minutes about the Noibu relationship. You and I have chatted a lot about this. You referred to us kind of fitting into your curated composability strategy. In your opinion, why was Noibu kind of an obvious fit for that?
Well, I mean, we've kind of alluded to it a couple different times. I mean, I think there's a rich history here between the orgs, like a lot of respect for what you've built and what you've done. I'm not saying that just because I'm on the podcast, but that's actuality. So there was already a comfort level. There was a tremendous amount, back to the prioritization framework I alluded to earlier through the offerings group. There was a tremendous amount of enthusiasm of incorporating you guys, mostly objectively through demand from our clients, demand from prospects, points of view from offering leads and other market-facing folks that felt like this was what we felt was a critical opportunity to take advantage of the value that you guys bring and ingest it in a deeper way that we can make available to our prospective customer base together and go to market jointly. So back to the point I've made a couple times, the cultural fit was already there. The joint value proposition was already there. We feel like it's an organic extension to what it already is that we're offering that we feel brings a material amount of value in a really organic motion. It just kind of checked all those boxes. And because of the history, it was just really easy. So to be candid, like if it was hard, maybe we wouldn't have done it despite the benefit, or at least not as quickly as we've had. But that's the long and short of it. I think this is the tip of the spear and more to come around curated composability that we're really excited to bring to market. So to do it with you guys as one of the first adopters of it, beyond proud of being able to do that together, just given all the variables I just touched on.
Yeah, likewise. You guys have been a phenomenal partner for us. And I'm curious, there's obviously tools within a platform like ours that enable merchants to find GMV opportunities, whether it's through speeding up their website, finding technical issues, UI, UX, session replay, all these different ways. It's kind of like a choose your own path of driving GMV. I'm curious, like how critical do you think that's going to be for the modern platform to have tools in which clients can self-serve effectively GMV opportunities, whether it's through any of the categories that we just discussed? Anything from a UI UX issue to what slow loading campaign to something like that.
Yeah, I mean, not to lead the witness, I think is material. Obviously, I think a lot of what we're, one of the first, when I interviewed here, and I think it'll play organically into what we're just talking about. I was trying to think in my mind, like the synthesis between the three products here and like what they all have in common, right? Makeswift around visual editing and experience, Fido around, product and catalog optimization and orchestration, and syndication around different channels and feeds. And then obviously BigCommerce is the legacy platform. And what I tied all together in my own head before even having conversations with this concept around optimizing revenue. And I think to your point, and what you guys bring to the table, everyone's looking to optimize revenue. How do I drive more profitable revenue? How do I gain more access to revenue? How do I create organizational agility? Whereas if I'm not able to optimize revenue, how do I pivot into other ways of achieving such? And how do I remove the friction in between? So having that in a self-service capacity that is, again, going to bring folks' attention to that very, very quickly, remove barriers and obstacles, and also highlight areas where they can double down, I think is material. In the new world order, it's just things happen so quickly. There's so many channels now. It's all about experimentation and optimization and doing it at scale very, very quickly. So I think anything that helps our customer base, either existing customers or prospective customers, able to optimize revenue at scale and create some semblance of organizational agility to achieve such, obviously we're going to view it as material and valuable to the business and the go-to-market. And I think, it speaks for itself. I mean, it's honestly, we are better because of this partnership. We feel like it strengthens the platform and the go-to-market and the offering. And this isn't a pride thing. This is like, I want to do what's best objectively for our customers and our prospective customers. And you guys make us better at what it is that we do. So I want to double down on that. I want to take advantage of that. And obviously I want to evangelize it as best I can. And for what that's worth, thank you for bringing that to the table. And thank you for the partnership. It's been invaluable to date, and looking forward to do more with you guys.
Likewise, and I appreciate the really kind words. And as we look to wrap up, Travis, because we're almost at the end here, it wouldn't be a podcast unless I asked you about AI. I just don't think you can launch a podcast in 25. So quick fire, how are you looking at AI? Are you looking at it more as an internal tool to drive productivity from your workforce? Are you looking at it as something that is going to be at the center of a commerce experience in the future and become a core product, maybe even its own channel? High level, where's AI top of mind for you?
Yeah, I would split it in two. There's certainly a bunch of internal digestion and applicability that we've had here. I've talked publicly about it. I think we've doubled our quota carrying capacity since late Q4. What we've been able to leverage in AI to accelerate onboarding and enablement is beyond my wildest dreams. Like all of the account planning and nuances around making objective recommendations, case studies, approaches, digestion of gong calls, like you name it, all of the administrative tasks that most market-facing salespeople and folks kind of resent in many capacities. It's really automated and made us so much better there. We're certainly looking at all sorts of other applicability within the business around anything from oversight of code development and deployment and things like that, and other use cases within the business. But externally, obviously it's material. We don't hand wave. Well, we haven't hand waved a lot. I talked a little bit, probably talked more about it in earnings last week than I've had combined up until this point. Certainly it's material. It's changing. Everyone's touching and feeling this thing every day. Agentic is coming. Certainly we're partnering with the best of the best and are in active conversations and efforts with the top AI partners, whether that's, OpenAI, Perplexity, Microsoft, and others. We're already feeding some of that stuff today. And I think one of the more unique things is, especially around Feedonomics, that the big advantage going forward in enriching these LLMs is going to be product and catalog optimization and data, as well as surfacing inventory availability and orchestration. And we already do both of those today through Fido across 30% of the Internet Retailer 1000. And I think you're going to see more and more of that get ingested into what it is that we're doing and taking advantage of it. So yeah, we're We're very bullish on it. We just don't hand wave a lot.
Thanks, Travis. I appreciate it. This has been a phenomenal episode. Thank you so much for joining, and yeah, excited to continue our partnership.
Thanks, Calvin. Thanks for having me, man. Really appreciate it.
The Ecommerce Toolbox Expert Perspectives is brought to you by Noibu. To find out more about Noibu and how we can help you debug your e-commerce site and rocket your revenue, visit www.noibu.com. That's Noibu.com. And then make sure to search for the Ecommerce Toolbox Expert Perspectives on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Podcasts, or anywhere else podcasts are found, and click subscribe so you don't miss out on any future episodes. On behalf of the team here at Noibu, thanks for listening.